All right, good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. Thanks for your patience. All right, unfortunately, we want to show a film. It's called Unlawful Killing. All right, so welcome to the second session in the public program today. We want to show a film. No, we're not showing Unlawful Killing. It's called Who Killed That Policeman Who Got Killed on Broadwater Farm that time. I don't like to call his name. It's not about trying to be disrespectful to him. All right, we don't mock what happened to him, and we don't want to disrespect his memory because he's important to some people by trying not to call his name, because when they talk about him, they don't call the name of Cynthia Jarrett. All right? We try to give balance. That's what the mainstream media says they're doing, so we're balancing it. So but we didn't get all the permissions that we need to get. And most notably, we didn't get a permission from the BBC. And because we've had a couple pops at the BBC in here as a part of our exhibition, we think we shouldn't take the risk and show all the film. So I do apologise for that. What we're going to do is show a segment of the film, 45 minutes worth. It'll still be a good segment. And then we're going to have a panel discussion here. The guy that's there with the see-through clothes, so you can't actually see him at all, is Mark Braithwaite. He should be here. I'm not quite sure where he's gone, but he'll be back here for the discussion. He likes a good talk, so I know he won't miss that. This is Winston Silcott, aka back in those days, he was known as Sticks. Our good brethren lived on Broadwater Farm and from Broadwater Farm. And this is Jude Lanchin. Jude, she was with us in the 80s, caseworker, is that what we'd call you? A caseworker, one of our better caseworkers who worked with a lot of our clients. Jude then went on to become a lawyer and is a senior partner. Senior associate partner, senior associate at Bindman's solicitors. Really expensive solicitors if you can't. If you can't, right, really expensive if you can't get legal aid. So it's really fantastic that Jude was there in the 80s with us. In some sense, might have cut her teeth on some of this legal stuff. Once we've seen the film, she's going to kind of be the moderator to help us to tell our story. So what you're going to get in this space is two of the Tottenham Three. That's really rare, all right? It's really rare. The only other time I ever put you guys on stage was, they only came together because Nicky Jacobs, really, wasn't it? That's what brought everybody together. And we're going to talk about a time that we can't really bring you back to. Unless if you're around in those days and engaged in those days, you'll understand. We're going to bring you to a time when, if we're talking about a war in Babylon, we brought the war to them. Well, they brought the war to us, we defended ourselves. And then, we had to deal with the weight of a system. And I think that we survived, really, is one of the greatest stories. But we're going to share some of that with you afterwards. And depending on what time they finish, because I got this thing when I'm in this space, I just want to walk around. So if any of you, how many of you have been in walkthroughs thus far? Right, so I'm not talking to you guys, all right? The rest of you haven't been on the walkthrough, all right? If time allows, because a walkthrough takes 2.5 hours, if time allows, after this is finished, I'll be happy to go on a walkthrough of the exhibition with you. And what that would help you to do is to locate this particular story that we're going to tell within the experience of the Black community in the UK. All right? So if we can, is that Mark? Come, Mark. And the thing is, he's not even shy, you know, so I don't even know why he's not on the platform, you know? Big up yourself. So Mark Braithwaite, again, one third of the Tottenham Three. And now I've just got him up on stage. I'm going to tell him to get off as we start to watch the documentary. But at least you all know what he looks like, right? All right. So everyone, if you want to say a quick hello, and then we're going to go to the documentary.
Hello. Good afternoon. Yeah. You need me to say it too? Yes.
Hello and good afternoon.
How long have you been out now, sir? Yeah? How long have you been out now?
19,
He's been out about
20
19 years, but he did 18 years before, so he's been out an equal amount as the time he's been in, and he underplays what he's been through. Because this is a man who the state went to publicly execute, but we don't do public executions, so they just tried to disappear him for a long time. And during the days when he was disappeared, I was out here campaigning, well, but for both of them. And it was hard. And, you know, I got arrested for murder a couple times, and it was depressing. And when I got depressed, when it was too tough, I went to visit this man here. And he used to inspire me and made me have the strength to continue to struggle. And he was inside feeling it. So the story you're going to hear in a while is really, really powerful. Jude?
Good afternoon. Hello.
For once, everyone did what I want them to do. Selector, boss that film, please, and we'll all be back immediately as this after. Thank you. Okay. Don't know about you, but for me, that was an interesting watch. Obviously, very interesting from our perspective, watching that with Winston and Mark. I remember the documentary because the Kurt Barlin, the presenter, you know, he made a big deal about wanting to do this documentary and wanting to tell the real story, the whole story, and nothing but the story. And we were really peeved by that ending. I mean, we were really peeved by it, because that's the crying policeman, right? And it's about how you engender sympathy and such. But think about what a copper said. He's one of the ones who went on the raid to the Jarrett's home, Jarrett family home, where they didn't have a warrant, where they stole Floyd Jarrett's keys, where an off-duty police officer led the raid. They went in there, pushed her over, stepped over her, continued the raid, and then came out. All right? So what he's saying there is, so what he's clearly saying there is, I wish I could talk to Blakelock's widow, so I could tell her it wasn't us. Which means, internally, they're blamed for everything that happened. They shouldn't have gone there. They shouldn't have conducted themselves as they did. And they should have responded to Cynthia Jarrett once everything went wrong. And this is the copper begging for forgiveness, basically. They're in full glare of publicity. They still kind of acknowledge that what we've always said was the truth is actually the truth. So though we didn't love the program, we're not sure that it really told our story. It helps to begin that process. I'm not going to talk a lot in this session, if I can help it. Thank you. I'm going to allow Jude, as a trained solicitor, and someone who, since she looked at me like that, I'll tell her the truth, she's really nosy anyway. All right? So I'm going to allow her to probe and to talk to Winston and Mark. I believe that was probably the first time that Mark even saw that documentary. I want to hand over, but again, I'm going to say this. There's no way we can reproduce you on this stage, and even by showing it, how dark and distressing and difficult and hard and oppressive, and it was just so immense what we all went through basically as children. Can't overemphasize that. So before we start, I just want to acknowledge and give a big hand to these two brothers, because they are our great survivors. Well done.
Winston, can I ask you why you think that you were targeted? Obviously, it's been made clear that you were initially on bail and then charged and convicted with a murder. But I think in most people's minds that wouldn't necessarily be enough for you to be, perhaps it was, but I'd like to understand, I'm sure people here would be, a little bit about your past before that. I can remember some incidents when Princess Diana came, etc. So you know what I'm on about. Why do you think you were targeted in this way?
Well, basically, back in those days, like what Martha and Stafford was telling you at the first session, when we was kind of getting politicized and doing things in the community, I was quite vocal. And obviously, growing up in them times, you had a lot of run-ins, obviously, with the police. And in their view is, they see as one thing. Basically, they look at you, well, you're a criminal. You can't change, you know? And I always sort of got that from the police, basically, you know what I mean? And as Broadwater Farm sort of progressed, like the Youth Association, we had a lot of interactions with the police, and that was their view. And a lot of things, what happened, they're coming for me. That's what they used to say.
And also, I think you and Stafford probably would agree that you were seen as somebody that, in their eyes, didn't abide by authority, if you like.
Yeah,
you know, you were a strong person, strong personality, and weren't going to take what was being dished out.
Well, that's correct. We weren't going to take their narrative.
Just moving on a little bit from that, and then I'll ask Mark a couple of things. We've all seen a little bit about how the police tried to build this case against you, and what's in the film is only a millimetre of what they did. Did you think it would get as far as it did? Were you ready and waiting for the total conspiracy that it all turned out to be? Not just the Esther, but all the kids who were pushed into making statements against you that turned out to be fabricated and lied and delusional.
Well, to tell the truth, at the start, I thought, no way. Because even though these alleged people was supposed to be calling my name, I was many characters, many people. I was Turkish, white, 4 foot nothing, weird glasses. But you could understand, once I saw the interview notes, I could see where the police are sort of training these young people to steer it in their direction. So then I realized, well, this is serious, very serious.
I mean, it might be a bit of a trite question, but how did you cope with this? I mean, it started then, and then it went on for 18 years.
Well, basically, something with him, he just told me I've got to keep strong, because the likes of my parents, friends, and family were supporting me when I was in there, I just thought the whole world was against me.
Well, the way the media were dealing with it, they were trying to make the whole world against you.
That's correct.
Before the ESDA test, did you believe that eventually something would happen that would blow it wide open and that you'd get back to the Court of Appeal?
Well, a lot of people, well, I shouldn't say people, a lot of inmates looked at me as like a madman, because I did believe it would be overturned, but I didn't believe it would be overturned so quickly.
Thanks. We'll come back to you, I think. Mark, do you want to tell, if you feel like it, a little bit about how you got dragged into this madness? Because obviously your story isn't. Yeah, you weren't even at the farm, and you were a Islington person. You weren't particularly connected to Haringey or Broadwater Farm, so maybe you can just explain a bit about what happened to you.
Well, what happened to me was I was nicked in Islington on February, I think it's February the 6th, 1986. So that was way afterwards. I was in a cab, and while I was telling the cab driver to turn one way, I saw a car coming flying down the road. So I said to him, give the car way. And as he gave the car way, the car stopped in front of me, stopped in front of us. And it was I didn't know who it was. Then another car come from behind. And then all I was done was dragged out of the passenger seat, put onto the basically, pushed my hands onto the top of the car, went through my pockets, flung everything onto the top of the car, handcuffed me, and then told me that I'm arrested for murder. And then they didn't say what it was about. They just basically put me in the car and drove me from Islington all the way to Barnet. And I'm going to myself, I goes, where are you taking me? Because you're going past the police stations where I live, and you're going past all the police stations that I know. And they took me to Barnet, and it felt like they was kidnapping me. And when I got to Barnet, they put me in the cell, they kept me there. I turned around and I'm asking them what's going on. They're not giving me no information to what's going on. And it took a while. Then the detectives came and they basically spoke to me. And then they started coming with this narrative, asking me these questions. And I said to them, I don't know what you're talking about. And they continued and continued. And then it was like they put me back in the cell, take me back out the cell. Put me back in the cell, take me back out the cell. And then it's like they're quoting a narrative to me, and it was like, how can I explain? It's like you're saying to yourself, you're there, and you're thinking to yourself, how do you basically cope with this situation? Because I've never been in a situation like this, right? So then they telling me about murder. I'm saying to you, you really must be off your head. Yeah, and they continued it. And it was only afterwards, it's like they turned around and they was asking me, they put in questions to me saying that you was on Broadwater Farm. I'm saying to them, no, I wasn't. And then they going, you was on Broadwater Farm, and then this going on. And it just got too much. So basically, for me, I went to court. They turned around and they said to me that they took me to court. They took me to, where was it? Tottenham. They took me to the court in Tottenham. I went to Tottenham there and I saw bundles of people down there. Then they took me back to the station. And when they took me back to the station, now all the time I haven't eaten, I'm sick, I don't feel well. And basically when it came apparent to me what was going on, it was that they was putting names to me to see if I knew the names. And I'm saying to them, I don't know none of these names. And because I'm telling them I don't know none of these names, they're telling me they brought out a list from people who lived in my area and said to me, do you know these names? And I said, no, these people are way older than me. I wouldn't have no association with them. So what are you talking about? So what I realized it was afterwards is that all of the majority of the kids them who was being arrested, it was like a domino effect. So if they ask you if you know a person, you say you know that person, then what they would do, they go and arrest that person, and then they ask another set of people's names, and then it's basically there. So it was only later on when I saw how many people were in the cells, and then they told me the same story which they basically went through.
Yeah, so in the end, the evidence that they claimed they had against you was actually somebody else's statement. Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah, somebody else's statement.
Somebody else who, again, later on, that was discredited. Can you just explain in a nutshell how you came to be cleared as well? What was the basis eventually, after all those years, of how you
Well, mine was basically was on the breaches of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, because we went to Strasbourg to the Court of Human Rights to appeal against it, and what the British government said is that we hadn't exhausted all our domestic remedies, meaning we hadn't applied to the House of Lords and that. We didn't apply to the House of Lords because of specific reasons. And what happened from there onwards, they said that because they said that, then it went back to the Home Secretary here, and then the Home Secretary then referred it back to the Court of Appeal.
Yeah, so in the end, it was another set of evidence or another example, as you say, of other people having suggestions and stories put to them. This person then named you in some fantastical things you were supposed to have done, plus there were other issues to do with breach of the law in the way that you were dealt with. Is that a
There was
summary of
significant.
what had happened?
Well, to be truthful, what basically, there was a case called, I can go a little bit more into detail on him. There's a case called Samuels, and the case Samuels had basically, it was the breaches of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, and Samuels was actually the guideline. But when they turned around, I read Samuels' case, and when it came to the Court of Appeal, when they had a book there and they've started to go through how many different, so what they did, it turned out is that my case had more breaches than the case Samuels, which was the guidelines.
So how did, we've heard about how Winston somehow, unbelievable really, maintained his strength and belief that eventually he would come out of this nightmare. So how did you sustain yourself in a belief, or maybe you didn't have a belief that eventually you were going to get out when you weren't even there?
I had a belief of getting out. I always had a belief of getting out, because basically there was only two options. It's either you go off your head or you basically keep your head, because I think when you go through a situation which you don't expect, I think you adapt, and the hostilities which, I can't even tell you how far we went through, the hostilities were great. So you had no choice but to turn around and to firm yourself up.
Can I ask both of you what impact, if anything, the defence campaign, the defence committee, all the struggles outside by all of us and a lot of other people to support you, try and push for new legal proceedings, did that make any difference? I know it might sound like a silly question, but sometimes you don't even know it. Did it sustain you at all? Because, you know, it's the importance of community struggle and campaigns.
Well, for me, it did sustain me. Because like I said before, being in there and you're getting the media coverage, TV coverage, you know, basically it's like the world's against you. And to have somebody to believe in you, plus as well, there was other inmates in there in the same famous cases like Birmingham 6, Guildford 4, Carl Bridgewater. And I used to sit with these guys and just drifting a bit. Basically, I used to sit with these guys, and they used to tell me their story and what they go through, and I'm thinking, hang on there. At least there's a story. When I look to my case, there's no story. They've got the so-called words, yeah? I didn't say them. And obviously, how am I going to prove that I didn't say them? And even if I did say them, they're ambiguous. They don't mean nothing. You see what I'm saying? So I'm thinking, boy, something's wrong. So I used to sit down like with some of these Irish guys, because they used to say, they're the blacks of Europe. And I said, when you're really black like me, you're in trouble. Because at least they make up a story. And they go through like a chronology of events in minds. They put, was it 30 words together? Which I didn't even say. And you got to understand, I was in Paddington Police Station when this alleged documentation is supposed to take part. And they alleged that I said, Jesus, Jesus, got up by my chair, and I went to a window to look out the window. Now, I with tears in my eyes and everything. What you got to realize, I was in a terrorist police station. When you look through the window, you can't see nothing through the window. So what am I going to the window for? It didn't make no sense. You see what I'm saying? So even when I initially got arrested, the first thing the police said to me, they don't care where I was in the world. They don't care where I was in the world. That's what they said to me. Yeah, they could discredit my people. That's what they said.
I think we could open it up to the floor now. If people have got specific questions that they'd like to ask either of Winston or Mark, or in fact Stafford as well, but more addressed to the two of them, or whether you two have got specific things that you would like to say that haven't been covered yet around the questions I've asked you. Room of silence, or is there somebody who's got any questions? I can't see because of the lights. Everybody's been stunned into silence. There's this lady. Who's this woman here? And
Hi, good afternoon. Firstly, thank you for talking your story. I can only imagine what it's like or how many times you've had to recall that story. And I appreciate that. And my first question is, are you all right? Because that's what I'd want somebody to ask me if I'd been through even a smidgen of what you've been through.
Well, to answer that question, I would say I'm all right, but I'm broken as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Mark, you all right?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm all right. Yeah, I'm all right.
Okay, good. I'm from Tottenham. My mum still lives in Tottenham, Radley Road. I had my little round black face pressed up to my mum's windows, watching people run down Radley Road that night, and my mum was screaming at me to get away from the windows. Tottenham will always be home for me. Yeah? No matter what anybody says about Tottenham, Tottenham will always be home for me. It'll be bad to somebody else, but it gives me warm feelings. How do you feel now from that experience where Tottenham and Broadwater Farm was home for you, maybe Winston, and okay, Mark, your experience of Tottenham will be different because I wouldn't blame you if you didn't want to hear that name again. But how does it feel now where this whole experience has bastardized your feeling of home, your happy memories up until then, where you were with your friends, with Stafford, with other people, enjoying yourself as young people, and all of a sudden, now that feeling of home, that feeling of belonging, now is only synonymous with something so terrible I can't even get my head around it.
Winston?
Well, for me, Tottenham will always be my home, to tell you the truth. The police experience hasn't deterred me from Tottenham, because before that, as a young person, not just me, many young people, we're doing great works. Yeah. We would do great works in Tottenham. Now, for instance, when I tell people that, what do you call it, Meals and Heels, but it's Meals and Wheels, yeah? Now, for instance, imagine there was this kind of divide on Tottenham where you had blacks and you had whites. Certain white people would see you and they'd drift away from it. Didn't want nothing to do with you, yeah? When we started to do Meals and Wheels, or Meals and Heels, as Stafford said, there was this kind of coming together. You kind of got to know each other, cracking jokes, talking, the shyness, the fearfulness evaporated. In some instances, people became friends. Especially like with me, I can remember I lived on the 4th floor And on the second floor below me, there was this elderly white lady. Every time I went in the lift and she was in the lift, she hold her bag like this. Seriously, yeah? And I was ignorant, so I had to stop lift or come out the lift, yeah? And after a while, we became friends. Seriously, we literally became friends.
It's not about Tottenham, right? It's not about after 2011, a bunch of councillors decided they're going to start a campaign called We Love Tottenham. Rubbish. There's very little to love in Tottenham, if we be totally honest. It's about the community and it's about the people, all right? What happened to him, they wanted us all to turn our back on him, and we never did. We supported him throughout his sentence, and when he was released, there's only one place he could ever come back to, where people weren't always going to be looking at him, pointing at him, or speaking behind his back. So there's no place like Tottenham, but it's about the people, not the physical location.
Mark, is there anything you felt like saying? It's not directly because you're not from
Well,
there.
no, I think that basically, I think that Tottenham as a whole felt the brunt of it. But I think that the wider black community in London felt it because everything changed from then. The policing changed, the way people looked at black people changed from then. Some black people believed that they need to assimilate to basically be understood. And a lot of things. I mean, for me, I've done a lot of growing up there, so I've done a lot of book reading and things, so I actually read a lot of things. And when I came and what I saw, what the place looked like in that short period of time was very different.
Yeah, and what I would say as well is that obviously not all of you have been around the exhibition, but if you get a chance to actually go back and look at all the footage and the media coverage from that time, I think you can't even imagine it in your head. It was, well, just do it if you feel interested and you will understand that, it was Tottenham, it was the black community, it was just disgusting, dark, that I don't even know what the words are really, just...
I think to cut back in there, I think, yeah, you do need to look at it. I mean, as a younger folk there, I would say to you that basically 1980, coming from you can start it from the 70s because we got internet now, so it's easy for you to research a lot of things. But if you look, coming from there, when people talk about Windrush, people just look at it as a standpoint of people coming from the Caribbean to England. But there's a lot what took place from them periods of times. Even our parents can turn around, and if you got grandparents, I would advise you to go and sit down with them and ask them how it was for them when they came here, and then it will bring you to present day. Because I think a lot of people are living in the illusion that now is like was back then. It's not the same, far. It's not the same at all. What's happened now is like back in the days, the racism was blatant in your face. Now it's basically institutionalized, it's basically marginalized, it's micro, it's all kind of different ways it's coming to you, and it's subtle. You understand me? It's just like when we was growing up, they had National Front. Yeah? And then I always ask people, where did these people suddenly disappear to? Because there's no more National Front. Yeah? And I said, they're now your housing officers. They're now your police. They're now you understand me? So you get it, they've all integrated. So they don't need to say what they have to say, they can do it. So you have to be more vigilant.
I'm sorry about what you guys had to go through. Just a quick question. If you could go back where you are right now as in this room and your younger self when you were arrested, what would you say to yourself now? And are you optimistic for the future? Is there anything that brings joy to your life right now?
You mean if I could go back knowing what I know now,
Yeah.
well, I wouldn't be optimistic, that's for one, for sure. I wouldn't be optimistic. Because like Mark said, the tables are sort of turned. Like I said, it's not as, when we grew up, a lot of things was much more blatant. Yeah? Like you've heard of the sus laws. You know what I mean? They could just stop you in the street and said you stole from persons unknown, just chatting in rubbish, take you to the court, yeah, to the magistrate court. You could get a 6 months, 3 months, was it DC, ball stool or whatever, just on that say so. Now, coming to present day, they've got a thing, was it joint enterprise, conspiracy, which is worse because you're not getting no 3 months, yeah, or 6 months DC, you're getting 25 years.
Well, hold on a sec. The joint enterprise isn't that was part of what we basically was charged under? On joint
Effectively,
enterprise.
yeah.
Well, in joint enterprise, all they have to do, they only have to find one in the group guilty, in the sense there, and then said that the rest of them actually by their presence being there, you created that issue. You're a part of it too. Yeah, it's like, all right, back in the days you could turn around, if you didn't know, you said, well, you didn't know. But with joint enterprise, it draws the whole lot, and it can draw like, say like all of you here, and they turned around and something happened inside of here now, they'll say that this group over here was actually involved through to joint enterprise. Well, now you're talking a different. You're talking a different thing completely, aren't you?
But no, he's right. What he's saying is they use joint enterprise against one target community and not against another.
Yeah.
I mean, look, right, sorry, because I did say I wasn't going to talk a lot, but he's stepping on my toes. He's doing my exhibition, right? But he's talking about some of the things we're going to talk about outside in the exhibition, because that's what we talk about. We show you, just with the soft laws that Winston spoke about, then the joint enterprise. The similarity about the two laws is that they're common law. These were laws that were on the statute books that actually weren't on the statute books, didn't go through Parliament. These are old Victorian laws that the police, they breathe life into it again. And the minute you hear they do that, this is institutionalization, because they're using these laws to target a certain section of the community. And we know that you don't need joint enterprise, we got conspiracy laws, right? We didn't need the SOS laws, right? There was a lot of laws around at the time, they used it to target people. This is about the institutionalization of racism. This is why we call it a war in a Babylon, because even if we're not fighting, even if you're not fighting, they still are. All right, so I think we're 1 or 2 questions away from wrapping it up. Yeah? Microphone, please.
Thank you, Winston and Mark, for your retelling such an insidiously evil story, and thanks, Stafford and Solicitor, for the support, because that's needed. What I was going to ask was, we know that bigotry and discrimination it's been institutionalized from inception, really. We know that from the transatlantic genocide. We know this, it's just raised its head in different forums. But looking at your story and stories before, not stories, accounts, life stories, life histories before, it has to be acknowledged that the media and the institutions work hand in glove. Throughout the century, if you look back to some of the old archive Times newspaper stories, the way they spin those stories, that needs to be recognized, because families that want to get support, and they go to some of these media institutions and they're already working hand in glove. They'll spin the narrative and you'll come out looking like the evil person, like what they've always done. We need to really, it comes out in this exhibition, Stafford, but it needs to be really highlighted so people can, because we need that protection.
Did you have a question about the media, or to ask?
Just to ask, what would you advise families that are going through these types of discrimination, I suppose, to avoid that media trap, because it is a trap?
There is no way of avoiding the media trap. What we try to show out here is about institutionalization, right? They want to talk about institutional, as if to say, this thing just happened accidentally, inadvertently, people didn't know, they didn't realise. That's bullshit. It's institutionalisation. It's how one institution gets the support of the rest of the system to embed the processes, the behaviours, to embed it not just in the system, but within the mentality of society. Is why we start off the exhibition with the quote from Kenneth Newman, showing clearly how they plan to other people and how that othering continues after they've gone. It's why we show that in 68, Enoch Powell makes that speech, Rivers of Blood, talks about swamping, and we show in 81 the police are still using the language of Operation Swamp. So we're trying to show the continuation. This is not by accident. And as for the media, you can't say that because they haven't identified racism, that they're not a part of it. They're an absolute part of the system. And if you watch, if you watch the film the other day about the 13 dead and nothing said, when people wanted to demonstrate about the police inactivity, it's when they got to Fleet Street. It was the behaviour of those journalists in Fleet Street that really incensed people. So we're fighting against a system.
I was just going to say, in terms of the media for Winston's case, when he was tried, all of the juvenile evidence had gone because it had been thrown out of court as fantastical. So he was literally convicted on the 23 words or whatever it was. I think it was under 30 when I can't remember now, but in the fifth interview. And that was after a year and a half of trial by media. You saw the photograph, that's where it started. The jury convicted him on that alone.
And on that photo, basically, as it portrayed in that documentary, when I was telling people, I had some people like disbelieving me. But the thing is, when we got the negative, you can see the white hands pulling away. Because when we got held in the negatives, yeah, well, basically, you saw white hands pulling away, basically. And to me, I've been in police stations before. So I was shocked to see behind the door, this door just closed, and on a tripod, there's this camera. I don't know if you ever watch Westerns back in the day, and they used to have these big old cameras. Yeah, well, it was something similar to that, but it was a modern day one. This was like made of aluminium. And I'm thinking, they're gonna fit me up here, because on Broadwater Farm back in them time, like, when we was doing good works on the Broadwater Farm, we used to have a photography class. And Nigel, he was showing me that you could take somebody's head and place it onto somebody's body. And that's what I thought they was gonna do. So I'm kind of incensed and frightened for my life.
I think there was one more question. Oh, two, and then we're done. So is there a mic?
Hi there.
Sorry.
Just one question I've always been interested in.
Sorry, there's Mark had his hands up, and then Leonard.
Is that all right? Okay, sorry.
We're going to bring this in really quickly.
It's a quick
folks.
question,
Please,
very quick
please,
question.
Please.
One thing I was just hoping, and this is more for the solicitor, to be honest. I think Tottenham and the black community in general is depicted as being lawless, not respecting the law, not abiding by the law. But actually, one of the big things in terms of how the case was built was how the police themselves threw the law out of the window in order to build the case. So in terms of when we've spoken about the kids getting rounded up in Tottenham to put words in their mouth and actually being kept without an appropriate adult, being kept outside of legal process in order to build that case, I was hoping you could explain just a little bit in more detail how the law was not followed and abused and thrown out of the window to make this case.
Okay, so very, very quickly, it was a dry run for the Police and Criminal Evidence Act in 1984, which is actually a total joke, because that act was the first act that was supposed to come in to actually safeguard suspects' rights, like with tape recording instead of handwriting, etc., etc. But they didn't follow it properly, and they used that as an excuse to say, well, it was just a dry run. When it came to the juveniles, basically they were allowed appropriate adults because they couldn't totally, not do that. But what they did is they got their own appropriate adults. So the police used people like social workers and various other people who they chose, and they basically intimidated them as well, actually. And most of the appropriate adults didn't stand up for the rights of the kids, and they were completely freaked out. And some of them had bought into the whole narrative themselves about, this terrible event and Blake Locke being hacked to death, blah, blah, blah. So they just got away with it. But when it eventually got to court and all of it came out with the lawyers and the QCs putting all this forward, this is why all the juveniles, the 3 who were in the murder trial, they got their cases dropped, and all the other juvenile evidence against Winston got thrown out because there was a catalogue of when Stafford, or maybe it was in the film, was talking about the kids with learning difficulties from Moselle, wasn't it? They went and rounded up loads of kids from this well-known school on the farm. I mean, it was just disgusting. They just basically did it until it got to court and was challenged. So that's how they got away with it until they couldn't. I think there was Mark. Yeah.
So first of all, I just want to commend you all for doing this exhibition. I've been to a few. I said this to Stafford earlier on, and for me, this one is on a different level. Yeah. Winston said he was broken, right? And I wanted to just ask you, put that in words. What does that feel like? Because I think, for me as a black man, we don't really talk about our feelings. We don't talk about the experience of growing up. I can remember, I got in a car. Anytime I got in a car, I would take my hat off because I'm worried about being pulled up by the feds just because I'm a black youth. Yeah. So I want to just, if you can encapsulate what does that felt like, and what has this exhibition changed that kind of, your youth growing up? How has it impacted?
Relating to when I said broken, I didn't mean like physically, because I believe I'm mentally strong. But what I mean is sort of broken. It's just that basically is that sometimes you always got to prove yourself, and I know what I went through. Yeah, and like Stafford was saying before, I went through harrowing times just with like Mark, victimized, crucified. But basically, when I say broken, it's like powerless. Because the police who told lies against me, when I heard they was going to trial, trust me, I was doing this. I'm going to court to have my day. Prosecution, nobody don't call me. So when they got off now, I'm thinking, how does that work? How could the British public sit with that and let them get away with it? And that's the brokenness. I feel that sometimes it's a helplessness. You know what I mean? That you're doing the right thing, going through the right channels, but you're not getting no readdress.
Yeah, I actually was going to ask you how you felt when Melvin and Sergeant got off. Just like... Mark, did you want to say anything about your... Or was it a question just to Winston?
I think it was to Winston, but...
Okay, sorry. No,
it's not a problem. But I do understand what Winston's talking about, and not being funny. It's only when you go through them situations, and sadly I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but trust me, you will realize that some of the things which you think go the way you think don't at all. And The system there, the system's kind of wired a certain way. And I think that sometimes as people, as just normal people, you know, I remember my mum used to pick up, when they used to go to the educational board, they used to pick up the pamphlet. When they used to go to the bank, they pick up they pick up the leaflets in the bank and they take them home and read. Not necessarily that they're going to utilize them, but they read them. And it's only now you really actually understand why. Because there's a lot of things what go on day to day which most of the general public are not aware of. You understand? And I think when we go there, we plead, like, you know, we go with this angle that we're pleading with people to understand us. And I'm saying, if you've been in this place from since how many years, from your parents gave birth to you in this place, when does it get to the point that you realize to yourself is that it's not people don't know you, they don't want to know you. So what you have to do in yourself is learn about yourself, and when you feel something is wrong, insert it in the correct manner to them. Instead of saying to yourself it's basically racism and it's this and it's that. I like the word and everybody uses it. I'm going to use this forum to explain what I mean. You have enough history beyond slavery, beyond everything, to defend yourself against anybody. But if you don't know it, then you can't say nothing. So you're always going to find yourself in this situation with people who have a less history than yours dictating to you.
Yes, Mark. Thank you. Leonard, I think you're the last person. You've got one quick question, I hope.
Yeah,
Sorry to cut you off.
As you know, it's difficult. But I really admire everything that you guys have done. I think it's admirable. And I just know that everybody here really appreciates it. Winston, really appreciate that you've poured your heart out to us, and my man there as well. It's really good. My question was, like, one got answered already, which was, how are you going to pursue, or if there was going to be any pursuing against these two police who got off? That was the first one, but you sort of answered that. And the other one was, is there any way what you're doing, could be rolled out like to other community groups to hear this story? Because to me, it's like something that really would need to be heard.
Stafford could answer that very quickly. There is a plan.
I'm finished. I had a few
Needs
more,
money.
but finished.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you see the man you just gave the microphone to, right? Asking to ask his bosses about whether or not they're going to give us an extension in this place.
Exactly. Money.
I mean, being here, doing this, it's taken us 70 years to get here, if we're being really honest, as a community, all right? So yes, we would love to bring it all over the country, but you know, and we're clear, the black communities want it, all right? One of the things, one of our milestones, one of our measures here, if we were going to be able to actually get black people into this space, and I can tell you, it's amazing, they're outnumbering everybody else, right? So there's absolutely an appetite for it from our community's perspective. There's no doubt about that. The question is whether there's an appetite for it from wider society. You think they're going to vote Brexit and then demand this in their towns and their villages next week? Huh? Yeah, they do need, absolutely. Absolutely. Maybe had we done this, they wouldn't have voted for Brexit. Who knows? But look, we would love to bring this everywhere. We think that every community, all the communities that we know about, Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool, Bristol, they all have stories to tell. All of them, you know? I've been to Manchester, I know how the uprisings there start. I've been to Toxteth, I know how they started. And then there's the history before the uprisings. So we know that every single area has a story to tell. We know in terms of racism that in London we're kind of probably luckier than other, privileged maybe, in comparison to other areas. We know the policing is bad here, but we know that it's terrible in other areas. So of course we would love to bring this to other areas. What we hope is that we're starting those conversations that are likely to make it more likely to happen. And I would hope that we are, because we're creating history in this place.
Can I just end with a massive round of applause to Winston and Mark and Stafford, but Winston and Mark particularly. Thank you, guys.